My name is Madison Clark, and sometimes life has a cruel sense of irony. This morning, I stood in my corner office on the 27th floor of a glass building that bears my company's name, sipping coffee from a porcelain mug. The city stretched out beneath me, endless rows of steel and light, the kind of view that once lived only in my daydreams. My silk blouse clung softly to my shoulders, and the hum of success filled the room like background music. On the outside, I looked composed, powerful, untouchable. But inside, a storm swirled. My phone buzzed on the desk, screen lighting up with a name that made my chest tighten, Mom. I hadn't heard her voice in months, yet here she was. A second later, another notification popped up, an email forwarded from HR. My parents had applied for jobs at my company. I let out a breathless laugh, though it wasn't from amusement. The same parents who once told me my career was a phase, who said art and design wouldn't pay bills, who pushed me to be someone I wasn't, now wanted me to sign their paychecks. I pressed the edge of my mug to my lips, letting the steam curl against my face, trying to steady my thoughts. What would I even say when I saw them? Would I remind them of the night they laughed at my dreams? Or would I stay silent, letting the walls of this office, the awards on the shelves, the empire I built, speak for me? I set the mug down and straightened my blazer. One thing was certain, the past had just walked back into my present. I was 19 the night everything changed. Our kitchen smelled faintly of burnt coffee, the overhead light buzzing like it, too, was exhausted. I stood there clutching a folder filled with sketches, mock-ups, and ideas, my first real portfolio. My hands trembled as I spread the pages out on the dining table, the way a magician might reveal her greatest trick. Look, I said, my voice bright, almost desperate. This could be something. I've been offered an internship at a design firm in Chicago. They think I have talent. My father, Richard Clark, didn't even look up from the newspaper. He just shook his head, a short, dismissive laugh escaping his lips. Madison, that's not a career. That's a hobby. You need to focus on something real. Something that pays. My chest tightened. I turned to my mom, hoping she would be different. But she simply folded her arms, her tone softer but no less cutting. Sweetheart, you know we love you, but art isn't stable. You should think about teaching, maybe nursing. Something respectable. The words hit harder than I expected. Respectable. Stable. Safe. All the things I wasn't. My throat burned as I whispered, "You don't believe in me." They didn't answer, but their silence was louder than shouting. That night, I packed a single suitcase. As I zipped it shut, my grandmother, Eleanor, knocked softly and slipped into my room. She didn't try to stop me. Instead, she handed me a small leather-bound notebook. "Write everything down, Maddie," she said, her wrinkled hand warm over mine. "Every idea, every pain, every triumph. Don't let their fear become yours." I pressed the notebook to my chest, feeling its weight like armor. Tears blurred my vision, but a fire lit inside me. For the first time, I wasn't just running away, I was walking toward something. At the bus station later that night, the cold air bit at my cheeks, my suitcase wheels clattering over cracked pavement. I opened that notebook and scribbled one sentence across the first page. "They don't believe in me now, but someday, they'll have no choice." I snapped it shut, tucked it under my arm, and boarded the bus. My heart pounded with fear, but also with something new, the pulse of independence. That was the night I stopped being their daughter, who dreamed too big. That was the night I became my own person. Chicago didn't welcome me with open arms. It tested me. My first apartment was a cramped studio with peeling paint and a leaky faucet that kept me awake at night. The radiator clanked like it was angry at me for existing, and the thin mattress on the floor left my back aching every morning. But it was mine. Every creak of the floorboards, every crack in the wall reminded me I had chosen this life. The internship was brutal. Long hours, impossible deadlines, and a supervisor who believed criticism was more valuable than sleep. There were nights I'd stumble home with ink-stained fingers and mascara smudges down my cheeks, wondering if my parents had been right all along. But then there were moments, tiny sparks that kept me alive. The first time a client nodded approvingly at my design. The first time my sketch was chosen for a pitch. The first time I stayed all night at the office, fueled by vending machine coffee, and saw the sunrise over Lake Michigan through floor-to-ceiling windows. I poured everything into my work. It wasn't glamorous. I waitressed on weekends, tutoring kids in math to cover rent. My hands were always tired, my nails chipped, but I didn't care. Every dollar saved, every skill sharpened, felt like another brick laid on the foundation of my future. And then I met Charlotte Rivera. She was the kind of woman people noticed when she walked into a room. Silver hair cut in a sharp bob, bold red lipstick, and a laugh that sounded like she owned the world. Charlotte was one of the senior partners at the firm, and unlike others, she didn't look through me. She looked at me. "You've got fire, kid," she told me after one particularly grueling presentation. "Don't let anyone snuff it out. Not clients. Not men. Not even your parents." Her words stuck. Charlotte became my mentor, guiding me not just in design, but in resilience. She taught me how to negotiate, how to read a room, how to command respect without raising my voice. When she finally left the firm to start her own company, she pulled me aside. "You're not meant to follow," she said, pressing a business card into my palm. "You're meant to lead." That night, I opened my grandmother's notebook and wrote, "Someday, I'll have my own company, and it'll have my name on the door." It took years of side projects, endless rejection, and sleepless nights, but eventually I did it. My first big break came when a small tech startup trusted me with their branding. I threw myself into the project, sketching until my fingers cramped, revising until dawn. When their product launch went viral, so did my designs. Word spread. More clients came. I hired a tiny team, then rented an office the size of a closet. I still told my parents very little. When they called, I'd say, "I'm keeping busy," or "just working on small projects." I didn't post much online. No pictures of offices, no humble brags. Part of me wanted to keep my success hidden until it was undeniable. Until the day came when they would see me not as their little girl with impossible dreams, but as the woman who made them real. The email from HR still sat open on my screen. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Richard and Elaine Clark, my parents, had applied for entry-level administrative positions at my company. The same company they once swore I'd never build. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 weeks later, they walked through the glass doors of Clark Creative. I watched from my office window as they stepped hesitantly into the lobby, their eyes darting across the sleek marble floors and modern art pieces mounted on the walls. The reception desk gleamed, staffed by 2 assistants who wore polished smiles and tailored blazers. Everything about the place screamed success, the kind of success they once told me was a fantasy. I gave instructions not to announce me right away. I wanted them to see. As they sat in the waiting area, I could see Mom whispering to Dad, her fingers fidgeting with the strap of her purse. Dad pretended to be calm, but his posture gave him away, stiff, uncertain, nothing like the man who once told me I'd fail before I even began. Finally, my assistant knocked on my office door. "They're here to see you, Madison." I smoothed my blazer, inhaled deeply, and said, "Send them in." The door opened, and for a moment, silence hung in the air. My parents froze in the doorway, eyes widening as they took in the view, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline, the awards lining my shelves, the framed newspaper article with the headline, "Clark Creative, the design firm redefining the industry." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad blinked, as if trying to process a reality that didn't fit his narrative. I rose slowly from behind my mahogany desk, heels clicking against the polished floor. "Welcome to Clark Creative," I said, my tone even, professional. "I'm Madison Clark, founder, CEO." The words seemed to echo in the silence. This is your company?" Mom finally stammered. "Yes," I replied, letting the word hang in the air. "The company I built. The one you told me would never exist." Dad shifted uncomfortably, his face a mix of disbelief and something else, pride tangled with shame. "Maddie, we didn't know you had done all this." I walked past them, gesturing toward the art on the walls. Each piece was one of my early sketches, framed as a reminder of where I started. You never asked. Every time I tried to tell you, you shut me down. So, I stopped explaining. Their silence was thick, suffocating. I turned back to face them, chin lifted. But now you're here, sitting in my office, asking me for jobs. Mom's eyes brimmed with tears. We were wrong, she whispered. We didn't believe in you, and we should have. I see that now. For a long moment, I studied them, the parents who raised me, who also broke me, the ones who had planted doubt in my chest, only for me to uproot it and build something stronger. I don't need your apology, I said finally, my voice steady. I needed it years ago.
What I need now is respect.
If you want to work here, if you want me to sign your paychecks, then you'll follow my rules. Because this company, this dream, is mine. They nodded, slowly, the weight of the power shift settling over them. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the daughter begging for approval. I was the woman in control. And as they sat across from me, humbled and silent, I knew they finally understood. The silence in my office stretched on until I finally broke it. Let's be clear, I said, folding my hands on the desk. This isn't charity. You wanted jobs here, and I'm willing to give you the opportunity. But it will be on my terms. Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Mom leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped together like she was bracing herself. I stood and walked slowly to the window, letting the city skyline speak for me. For years, you dismissed my passion as a phase. You told me stability mattered more than fulfillment. But look where stability got you, sitting in front of me, asking for a chance. I turned back, meeting their eyes. So, here are my conditions. Mom swallowed hard. Conditions? Yes. My voice was firm, but not cruel. If you work here, you'll treat every employee with respect. No dismissing ideas. No belittling efforts. The way you dismissed mine. Dad shifted in his chair, his pride clearly wounded. Second, I continued, you'll start at entry level. No titles handed out because you're my parents. You'll earn respect the same way I did, by working for it. You'll answer to supervisors younger than you, and you'll do it without complaint. Mom's eyes dropped to the floor. And third, I said, softening slightly, you'll take time outside this office to figure out what you really want. Not what looks respectable. Not what's safe. What actually lights you up. Because I refuse to watch either of you die with regret the way you nearly forced me to. The room went still. Dad finally spoke, his voice low. That's humbling. I nodded. It's supposed to be, but it's also a gift. You get a second chance at work and at life. Something not everyone gets. Mom wiped at her eyes. Maddie, we don't deserve this. Maybe not, I admitted. But I'm not doing it because you deserve it. I'm doing it because I refuse to repeat the cycle. I know what it feels like to be silenced, and I won't be the one silencing anyone else.
Not even you.
For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Dad leaned back in his chair, exhaling like the weight of decades had just hit him. Mom reached for his hand, and for the first time in years, they didn't look like the untouchable parents I grew up with. They looked human. I returned to my desk and picked up the leather notebook my grandmother had given me. I flipped through pages filled with old sketches, messy notes, and dreams scrawled in the margins. Then I looked at them and said, all of this, started with a notebook and a choice. I made mine. Now it's time for you to make yours. They nodded slowly, both of them absorbing the gravity of the moment. And in that instant, the balance of power shifted forever. The weeks that followed were strange. Seeing my parents in the office every day was like living in an alternate universe. Dad in a plain button-down, quietly entering data under the supervision of a manager half his age. Mom answering phones at the front desk, learning to smile through stress instead of letting it harden her voice. At first, they stumbled. Dad bristled when corrected. Mom fumbled with software she'd never used. But slowly, almost reluctantly, they adapted. And in their humility, I saw something I'd never seen before: respect. One afternoon, I passed Mom's desk and overheard her talking to a younger employee. "Your idea matters," she said softly, encouraging. "Don't be afraid to share it." I used to make that mistake, not listening. Her words stopped me in my tracks. Later, I found Dad lingering in the break room, staring at the skyline through the window. "You were right," he admitted quietly, without looking at me. "Passion matters. I just didn't understand it until now." For the first time in years, his voice didn't sound like a lecture. It sounded like honesty. At night, when the office lights dimmed and the city glowed, I'd often sit alone in my office with my grandmother's leather notebook. Its pages had grown worn, corners frayed from years of use. And every time I flipped through it, I was reminded of that night at the bus station, the girl with trembling hands who had nothing but a suitcase, a notebook, and a stubborn dream. Now, that girl had become a woman who built an empire. A woman who had not only changed her own life, but was forcing the people who once doubted her to change theirs. The irony didn't make me bitter anymore. It made me grateful, because in their dismissal, they had given me the greatest gift: the determination to prove them wrong. One evening, after the last employee had left, Mom approached my office door. She didn't say much, just held out a cup of coffee, my favorite extra foam, just the way I liked it. "We're proud of you, Maddie," she said, her voice breaking. And for once, I believed her. I closed the notebook, pressed it to my chest, and let the moment sink in. The cycle had shifted. The power dynamic had flipped. But more importantly, healing had begun. As I stared out at the glittering skyline, I whispered the words that had once been scribbled in shaky handwriting on the very first page of that notebook. They didn't believe in me then, but now they work for me.